Hi, my name is Jay Sugarman, and I want to welcome you to Innovation Showcase. The main purpose of this ongoing series is to inform viewers about exciting innovations and creative individuals across the fields of business, science, technology, education, and the arts. Today, via Zoom, we're fortunate to have as our guests Jason Fahy and Ben Ioset. Jason is the Associate Director of the Ocean Exploration Cooperative Institute, which is associated with the University of Rhode Island. And Ben is the Chief Scientist and Maritime Archeologist for the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. Together with other colleagues and aided by their remotely operated vehicle, Rhody, they're currently aboard the research vessel Lake Guardian, exploring a number of shipwrecks in the Lake Ontario Marine Sanctuary. During the program, we'll find out why and how this fascinating initiative came about, and in the process, come to better understand and appreciate the notable efforts underway to document and preserve maritime history, capture high-resolution imagery and 3D models, advance marine archaeology and technology, and build a comprehensive shipwreck database. Let's start by meeting Jason and Ben and hearing all about their time aboard the Lake Guardian. Welcome. So delighted you're both able to be here.
Jay, thank you for having us. Thank you.
I had the good fortune last week to come across the wonderful article in the New York Times about the expedition. Eager to find out more and have you inform viewers. But before we jump right to that, I think it would be of interest if each of you would share just briefly a little bit more about your background, professional interests, current positions. Jason, would you start, please?
Sure. I was born and raised in upstate New York in a small farm town called Wayland, New York, here near Lake Ontario. I was a college basketball player at the United States Naval Academy and served for a 20-year career in the Navy, doing ocean exploration, utilizing ocean technology, and deep sea diving was kind of my expertise in the Navy. And then I retired in 2021 and was lucky enough to join the Ocean Exploration Cooperative Institute at URI and got right into the science kind of side of things. I went from defense to science, but
Mm,
very similar operations with the same technologies just being applied for a different purpose.
wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Ben, welcome. A little bit about your background, please.
Yeah, I'm also actually a native of Central New York. I grew up in Hamilton, New York, about an hour and a half southeast of Oswego,
Mhm.
and originally got into maritime archaeology through diving wrecks on Lake Ontario and the St. Lawrence River.
Ah,
So this place is home for me, and
yeah.
pursued that professionally. Got a, PhD from Texas A&M in nautical archaeology, and my research focuses on the maritime history and archaeology of the Great Lakes. So.
Wonderful, wonderful. Eager to hear your insight shortly. Jason, what are the main goals of the expedition currently underway on the Lake Guardian?
Yeah, we were lucky enough to be selected by NOAA to participate in this project. We're proud to help build the database, the environmental baseline and characterization of shipwrecks within the lake. We have a mapping system on board. We hope to find additional sites to add to that database. Yeah, the image here of the Environmental Protection Agency's vessel, the Lake Guardian, which is our host for the last 2 weeks. We're really
Mm.
lucky to have solid partners with the EPA on allowing us to use this vessel. It's been very capable. It allows us to host a science party of, we've been between 16 and 12 personnel as we've kind of had different phases of the expedition. But we have scientists aboard, we have ROV pilots, we have students, we have videographer and photographer that make up the complement of the science party, and we all been very warmly welcomed on the Lake Guardian.
Terrific, terrific. Ben, how does this project fit into the broader mission of the Lake Ontario National Marine Sanctuary?
Lake Ontario National Marine Sanctuary was designated last July to protect maritime heritage and just general cultural heritage resources within Lake Ontario. It encompasses 1,722 miles or square miles of the eastern end of Lake Ontario. Um, and it includes a large collection of historically significant shipwrecks that have important implications for our national maritime history. and then also the local preservation conditions provided by the Great Lakes, and specifically this Great Lake, really allow a excellent opportunity for not only preservation of shipwrecks, but really a opportunity to engage with, study, and educate relating to this really unique or piece of heritage that we have here.
Well,
This project specifically ties into that, in that URI and the Ocean Exploration Cooperative Institute are helping us to gain baseline data. So the first look at a lot of resources, shipwrecks in very deep water, that we otherwise can't put divers on, but which NOAA is also in charge of protecting, managing, and researching.
What do the shipwrecks tell us about 19th century commerce, migration, or life on the Great Lakes?
Well, archaeology can tell us about many things that weren't written down in history. Written records also contain biases, and that includes what isn't written down. This Many of these wrecks are carrying bulk cargoes, grain. Yesterday, we examined a wreck that had a cargo of wooden lath for constructing plaster and lath walls.
But we've also found a vessel that was, you described, and correct me here, but as a packet barge, right? Like a packet freighter.
It was a small packet schooner.
Yeah.
It was lost in the 1830s, and that's a beautiful example.
Yeah.
In that, at that point, Lake Ontario is still very much the frontier. The frontier was moving rapidly west with the opening of the Erie Canal, but transport in this region was still incredibly hard, and a lot of these lakeshore communities were very isolated. So water transport provided their sole connection to wider markets. And aboard this, we found barrels and crates in the rear cargo hold that probably contain agricultural produce.
Yeah.
As well as basically consignments of farm implements and just daily wares to sustain these frontier communities along the lakeshore. So it tells us a lot about what life was like, not only on the ship, but also in the communities that they connected.
Fabulous, fabulous. How's climate change affecting the preservation or deterioration of the ships?
Well, water temperature, last year we had some major fluctuations in water temperature. It was quite a bit warmer than usual. We get, well, there's invasive species are probably a more immediate concern.
Yeah.
For that, but shallow water shipwrecks, um, storm intensification, seasonal weather events do have a massive effect, and can have a very instantaneous and dramatic effect on especially shallow water shipwrecks.
Yeah.
So our near shore shipwrecks, things that are shallower than maybe 30 feet of water, are certainly affected by seasonal weather events that.
Terrific. Jason, I mentioned in the introduction Rhody. What is Rhody and how does it work?
Yeah, Rhody is a remotely operated vehicle. This is a robot connected by a fiber optic tether to the ship. It allows us to explore with cameras, lights and lasers, all kinds of sonars, all kinds of things. These shipwrecks, all those sensors, all those tools have a very specific purpose, and we can transmit all that high bandwidth right to the ship. And then you maybe saw the live stream that we shared last week, where we were able to share the video from the ROV to the public. Here you're seeing an image of the small gripper that is on the vehicle and the piloting camera. In the previous image, you were able to see the Discovery stereo camera on the skid, the lower portion there. This is really the main tool for this project, is collecting imagery with the stereo camera, which has got the lens cover on it now with the branding of the manufacturer, Voyas. But that camera collects 20 frames a second of high resolution imagery, and a stereo pair of those images at the same time allows us to build these 3D models. And the manufacturer also provided a software package that allows the 3D model to be constructed in real time, allowing us to understand if we've got coverage in every nook and cranny of the wreck, so that when we we do the final reconstructions back at the university, we know that we're not missing big parts of the shipwreck. Here's a scene of launching the ROV over the side of the ship. You can see the umbilical highlighted in yellow there. And in the hand on the person on the right is a clump weight that we use to maintain tension on the umbilical so that the movements of the ship are disconnected from the movements of the ROV, because we didn't want the ROV to be as the ship moves on the surface to be yanked around on the lake bed. And it's got a small little beacon. You can see that small little device on the top of that black piece of plastic. Very kind of simple construction, but that beacon allows us to know where the clump is. And then we have beacons on the ROV. We know all the pieces and things are going on the seafloor to allow us to safely navigate around these very, very complex wreck sites.
Any issues come up with Rhody on this expedition?
The issues only have been from a bit of inexperience with this system. We've only had the vehicle for a month.
Oh,
So
wow.
we did a number of training exercises with the students off the pier at the university and in the tank there. We went to a quarry in Vermont and trained for 3 days very intensely with the system. But we don't have expeditions under our belt with this robot. It's brand new. We just partnered with the manufacturer JM Robotics to build this vehicle, and it arrived basically just in time. So this was the first at sea utilization. So we now are in this very efficient rhythm, but it took us a couple days to figure it out, and it didn't cause any drama. There was no damage to the shipwrecks, but it was just refining our checklist and the order of operations that we were doing to be really efficient.
Very exciting. Wow. Ben, what kind of real-time decisions do you make while monitoring the ROV's live feed?
Well, a lot of my role has just been making archaeological observations and kind of directing the movement in partnership with the pilots, who are ultimately in control and responsible for Rhody's safety. Um, a lot of the calls that I have are related to making sure we get full coverage on photo models, or examining specific artifacts or features of the ship that we want to really get documented well. But also another role is just ensuring safety of the shipwrecks themselves. Obviously, it's a complex operation, and we want to make sure that we're conducting it in a manner that's responsible.
Yep.
Because these shipwrecks, they are one of a kind. We don't make shipwrecks like we used to, fortunately for us. But at the same point, each of these tells a unique story about a unique vessel and moment in time.
I
And
think
once those sink,
yeah.
and once those or once we damage or lose those, we can never get them back. So we have one chance to really tell that story and do it right, and make sure we're protecting these wrecks as we document research.
That's your official position, but you've also said, "Ooh, can we go back and look at that?" Like
It's also great fun.
all the time. It's like, and we love to see that, because that means there's something significant, there's something interesting, and Ben, you're a wealth of knowledge, and tell us that story as we see that component of the steam boiler, or we see that object in the hole, it's great for the crew and the students to be able to hear all of that as you get excited.
For many of these wrecks, we don't necessarily have a solid identification. So a huge part of what I'm hoping to get out of this to help us with that database we were mentioning earlier, is getting good IDs between the wreck and a historical ship that sank in the area. And as part of that, I'm sitting there behind the pilot taking notes of every little feature that might give us a hint towards what we're looking at. And so far, I think we've dove on 6 or 7 shipwrecks. We're not sure what the ID is. So I've got my work cut out for me for the rest of the summer, figuring out what these are.
No, what a treasure trove of information to sift through for sure. Speaking of that, Jason, how are the 3D computer models created from Rhodey's footage, and what do they help us visualize?
Yeah, so that Voyus Discovery stereo camera, which is a commercial product that we've integrated into the vehicle, allows us to capture images simultaneously from both of those the cameras within the device. The the software utilizes each of those images to recognize common features and how they change in the next image, puts that together as with the inertial navigation unit data from the vehicle to understand how the ROV is pointed, which way the camera is oriented, and uses that to lay those photos over each other to recreate the shipwreck. And you can see in the image here on the screen on Jonathan's monitor, the green is the path of the ROV around the shipwreck, the green
Ah,
line, and then the software is building a point cloud that represents the model, and each of those points is referenced back to an image that we've collected. And when we do the final processing, we'll basically drape the images over that point cloud. It'll be dimensionally accurate and
mm,
photorealistic, and so we expect to be able to produce really stunning images of what will be 16 different shipwrecks that we've visited. You've examples, if you've seen Shackleton's Endurance, the
mm,
model that came out of that recently,
mhm.
we expect with this system to be able to provide that same quality of three-dimensional model.
Yeah.
Fabulous, fabulous. Ben, you mentioned the artifacts. What steps are underway to ensure that they're studied without being damaged?
Yeah, I mean, looting or removal of artifacts, even handling of artifacts by divers, help loses information. It decontextualizes that individual artifact, and we learn so much more
I
from
love that photo.
understanding and studying an artifact in its original location. Um, so moving, looting, and tampering with artifacts on sanctuary shipwrecks is prohibited by regulations through the National Marine Sanctuary Act. For some of these sites, they all are treated individually based on the level of risk for the site. A lot of these sites that we're seeing are pretty pristine. We dove a few sites this week are in 600 feet of water. I don't anticipate they're going to get too much diving traffic, but
Mhm.
I think the other threat though might be that these ROVs are becoming more
yeah,
readily accessible. A Blue Robotics ROV, which runs off of a lot of the same operating system and control systems that are in our vehicle, can be deployed to 300 meters off of a small
yeah.
boat, and you could have an entanglement, you could have components kind of disturbed with getting snagged in those, even people trying to do something similar to what we're doing.
Mm,
Yeah, the first step, I guess, is the documentation and gaining
mm,
the maximum amount of information from things as they are now, because these sites will never be more pristine and better and as good of shape as they are right now.
Hmm.
So that mitigates loss of data going forward and helps us to reassess how things are changing at a site. Um, Another thing on some of these sites, some of the shallower sites, you see things like intrusive plastic litter that drift
Yeah, we
into the
did.
site
Yeah,
by currents. Eventually, hopefully, we'll be able to put divers down on some of these and go clean that up.
we've got fishing line on the site we're at now,
Yeah,
right?
the
Yeah.
site we're on now, a big protective action for diveable sites is putting a mooring buoy on, which avoids anchor damage to those sites. But another advantage of that is this area has a fairly thriving recreational and charter fishing industry, and they're fishing with downriggers. Well, there aren't really any fish. I mean, we haven't seen really any fish at all
mm.
Not a
on
one of
Rex
significance. Yeah.
Rex this week, besides the little gobies and deepwater sculpin.
Yep.
Um, but by putting a mooring buoy on some of these kind of middle range wrecks, it can actually tell people that are trolling and using downriggers to avoid that because they can lose equipment,
Yeah.
but also they can damage the wreck. So it can be, I think, a mutually beneficial system that benefits fishermen, divers, all sorts of individuals using these sites. So
Just very briefly before we move on, what are some of the items we've seen in these last couple of images?
So the one that's up right now, this is the tugboat Philip Becker that sank in 1879 in a storm. We were able to positively ID this one
Mhm.
during the expedition based on its enrollment information and its dimensions. Here on the left, you're seeing the bow, the front of the vessel is towards the left, and you can see the remains of the wheelhouse and with the ship's wheel resting in the kind of broken remains of the wheelhouse. And then at the right, This is the boiler room, and you can see a boiler at the very front side of that underneath the
Mm.
roof, as well as the remains of a steam whistle and the smokestack on the cabin roof.
In the lower right or the lower left, excuse me, you can see there's a little spot where the invasive species, the coaga mussels, aren't growing. That's like
Mm.
you mentioned the
Yeah.
brass or copper plate that was a
They,
prevent chafing on the lines.
yeah, it would prevent chafing on the lines or lines from biting into the railing and eroding it. But they the coaga mussels, since it's a cupreous material, won't grow on that.
Yeah.
So
Terrific, terrific. You know, we're fortunate to have a short video clip that we're going to roll in, and feel free to add some commentary of what we're seeing.
So this is the two-masted schooner Farmer's Daughter. This was constructed in 1816. We don't have an exact date on loss, but it was lost, went missing in a storm reportedly after 1829 when its last enrollment was there. The archival research to fill out the history is ongoing. Here's the bow. This is characteristic of very early 19th century sailing vessels.
Mm.
Here you can see not only is this vessel constructed with great care, it's relatively small, which these vessels, similar vessels later in the century might be 130 feet long. This one was only, off the top of my head, I don't remember the exact length, but it's less than 50 feet long.
Yeah.
Mm.
Here you can see the figurehead, kind of the old-fashioned style bow, which is a purely decorative element. The structure it's on was used to keep the spar above it, the bowsprit, which extends out horizontally from the ship, down and in place when the sails were set. But that was a bit of elaborate decoration that is not super common on Great Lakes ships.
You can imagine the hazards for the ROV pilot to navigate around wreck
Mm.
with these components
Mm.
laying every which way. And
Here we
yeah,
have an example of like the excellent preservation. These are hemp or manila ropes that have been preserved in
Wow.
silt on the lake bed since this vessel sank.
Fabulous, fabulous. You know, you mentioned earlier live stream. What do you see as the value of live streaming with the public in real time?
I think that one of the unique things that we didn't mention about this sanctuary is that it was generated by the local communities on the lake. You know, the four
Ah.
counties around the lake that border the sanctuary banded together and proposed to the federal government to create a marine sanctuary here. And so we we are very proud to give back to those communities that their advocacy for this to go through this process and create this sanctuary is working, and this is a product of that. And I've the questions have come up when we gave a few ship tours mid expedition was, do you think that we could be like Thunder Bay, where there's a diving portion of this and there's an economic engine associated with these shipwrecks, and this is the first part of that process, and we're proud to be kicking it off.
Yeah. To add to that, I would say these wrecks specifically, since a lot of these are in very deep water, um, most people in the public, and most divers, will never be able to visit
Yeah.
some of these wrecks. So the only way, as part of NOAA's mandate to expand public awareness and steward these sites, part of that we see as integral is public education, and we can preserve heritage in perpetuity. Um, but if we don't share it, there isn't a whole ton of reason to do so. So by doing these photo models that will be publicly available, sharing the video, and also sharing in like really unique moments, like the first time we laid eyes on that wreck out in the middle of the lake
Yeah.
on the 23rd. Um, we can bring these wrecks to the public, though the public can't actually go to these wrecks.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And yeah, in doing so, we hoping to spark curiosity and learning
Mhm.
about the region's maritime heritage. So.
Most definitely. And I think this connects to next question is how are students and early career scientists involved in the expedition?
We are lucky to have some phenomenal students from the University of Rhode Island and the University of Maine with us on board. They have been able to move through the kind of stations that it required to get to finally being a pilot of the ROV.
Wow.
And, my first couple of days, there was a lot of coaching and a lot of mentoring. And these last few, the students have led all the evolutions from our preparations on deck to setting us up. And there's a co-pilot that does the navigation and talks to the ship, make sure the data is coming in correctly, looks at the models as they're being built, and then pilot. And so the students have, we have 2 undergraduates, a graduate student, and a PhD candidate on board, and they've all moved through those positions and have piloted successfully over the last few days.
And I know you mentioned the local community. You've had contact with some of those students as well.
We've had outreach events at Oswego High School virtually while we were on the ship, but then also we pulled into port and had Oswego High School join us and did ship
Yeah.
tours with the high schoolers. And my favorite moment, absolutely favorite of this expedition, Ben was describing the shipwrecks and showing a similar video that you just showed us. And you see the eyes get wide, and this particular student says, "You mean this is in the lake right here?" Like just realizing that this isn't something you see on TV and on the far side of the world, but this is right here in my backyard. You got to be kidding me.
That's
And
great.
you could see every student like kind of nudging each other and elbowing, like, "Can you believe this?" And the parents that were with them were equally enthused. It was like really fun to give back to the local community and spark this interest in the sanctuary.
Fabulous, fabulous. In closing, very briefly, what's the next phase of research look like?
I've got a summer full of students in the lab, data processing, building these models. We have a very high standard that we're going to attempt to achieve. So that will take time and dedicated effort. We'll get that to Ben. And then, Ben, you have probably a decade of analysis.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll be plenty busy going through this and developing the database, but also kind of the working on the follow-on actions. Once archival research, identify these, but also on any wrecks that are shallow enough for like technical divers, assessing whether we think that site is a safe site for public access, and then on a number of shallower sites that we're also going to be working on with divers next month. We're hoping to eventually, go forward and bring those to a stage where we'll have mooring buoys sometime next year, and have people be able to go out and dive those. So it won't just be researchers at that point. It will be anyone that can access the site. So
Terrific, terrific. For those who want to continue to follow and find out more information, where are 1 or 2 places they should be directed?
For the technology side, I would say if you go to nautiluslive.org, which is a sister ship to the capabilities we have here, they're out in the Western Pacific using ROVs to explore the ocean and shipwrecks. They actually have an expedition coming up in the Solomon Islands in Iron Bottom Sound. So if you're into World War II history, that's going to be epic. And then NOAA has a ship of ocean exploration called the Okeanos Explorer. Same thing. Go to NOAA Ocean Exploration's website and follow the Okeanos. They'll be live streaming their exploration as it goes, similar to Nautilus. And we've got a few projects coming up, potentially in the spring next year, looking at cold water coral habitats and a few other shipwreck projects with Rhody.
Wow.
So if you're really excited about Rhody, don't worry, there'll be more content coming with that vehicle.
for Lake Ontario National Marine Sanctuary, you can follow us on Facebook. It's NOAA's Lake Ontario National Marine Sanctuary. Or you can find more information on the website.
Yeah.
It's the National Marine Sanctuary.
Terrific, terrific. Well, unfortunately, we've come to the end of the program. I want to thank both of you again so much for taking the time to be here, for giving this wonderful overview, insight to the expedition. Very exciting. Look forward to following it in the future, and just want to wish you continued success with future endeavors.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jay. This was great.
Also want to thank those of you watching for joining us, and hope you'll be able to tune in next time.